Do you want to extract data that is stored in a database and display it to a user in Discord? Well then, in this video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how you can do it. How you can get your Discord bot to connect to a database, to take data from it, and to display it to a user in a message. Hi friends, it's James, and welcome back to my channel. In the last video in this Discord bot series, we looked into creating a command that allows users to store data in a database. And it worked really well. We went over how you set up a local database on your computer, and we went over actually how we write the command to actually store that data in that database. Well, in this video links very closely onto that video. What we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to be retrieving that data that the user stored in the database and displaying it to them in Discord. So, if you haven't seen that previous video and you haven't followed along with that, go ahead and watch that first, as you need to understand how all of that works for this video to make sense. So assuming that you've now watched that video, so let's get started into retrieving that data from a database and displaying it to the user. So, I've written a very basic command that follows on from our storing info command. And this command here, I've just given it the name of retrieve info. And as the description says here, we're going to retrieve some data that a user has stored in the database. This is a basic slash command, and hopefully you understand what that is. If you don't know what it is, go ahead and watch my previous videos on which I explain all of that. Okay then, well, the first thing that we need to do is get the ID of the server in which the Discord bot is being currently running. So to do that, we do just guild is equal to interaction.guild.id. And while we're here, we also might as well define the table. And well, we did this in the previous video, so I won't explain it again, but we can literally just come up to that previous command and copy the table name. The name of the table in which the data is stored for the specific server. Great. So now we can write our try. So we just want to connect to the database. And to save us some time, we can literally come up to our previous command and literally copy our whole of our connection command. We can literally go ahead and just paste it in here. Great. So now we want to go ahead and write our query to actually select some data from a database which relates to the user. So to do this, well, we first just need to initialize the connection. So we did that before in the previous video, and we need to do it again. So cursor is equal to connection.cursor. And open and close brackets. There we go. We've made the initial connection. Now we need to write our query to select that data from a database. So we're going to first write SQL underscore select underscore query is equal to, and now we need to write our query. The query in which it will actually select data from the table which relates to our server that we're in, which also relates to the user who is asking to select the data. I really hope that makes sense, as that was a lot of words in one sentence. I'm just going to quickly speed run and write in our query, and then I'm going to go ahead and explain it afterwards, as it's a lot easier to explain this way. And then you just go ahead and copy it word for word, or whatever is needed in your circumstance. What we're doing here is we're first saying select. So we're telling the database that we're here to select some data. The asterisk here, this star, we're saying we want to select all the data, so all the data from one row of a table, and then we're saying from, and then we're defining the table. So we're saying what table we want to select this data from in the database. And this table here relates to this table object up here. Then we're saying where the user is like the user who is running that command, who is actually requesting to retrieve this info. So we're saying we want to select all of the data from the table of this server where the user who is running this command has stored some data. So let's say, for example, I have stored some data in this server, so the table of the server. I want to select all of that data that I have stored, that I have personally written and stored in that table. No one else is just mine. So that's why we're saying where the user is like the user who is running that command. Hopefully that makes sense. So what we do now is we just need to write the connection request to actually execute this command in the server. To do this, all we do is cursor.execute open and close brackets, and then all we need to do is just copy in SQL select query and put it inside of our curly brackets. So now we just need to finish writing our connection. So we can just do record is equal to cursor.fetch all. And this is where it gets very interesting. This record here, this record object will contain all of this fetch data from a data that relates to our user who has run that command. And it's being stored inside of this record object. Now we can write a for loop. And this for loop will be able to go through each record, so each row in the table that user has stored, basically print it out to the user in Discord. So that's what we're going to try and do now with this for loop. But the way we're going to be doing this is we're going to first create an array. And this array will be called received data. And you'll see why we're creating this in a second. It will all make a lot more sense if it doesn't make sense already. So we're going to write that for loop I was just talking about. So for row in record. And what we want to do here is we want to type the name of our array, so received underscore data, and we want to append each row to this array. And we're going to append it in the form of a dictionary. I'm not going to explain what dictionary, append, or arrays are in this video, as that is just some basic Python that you should know, or you need to know when writing Discord bots. So that's why I'm not going to go into it now in too much detail, or any detail in the first place. I've now written this line of code, so I will explain what this is doing. So we're saying we want to add each row of data from our database to this received data array. I'm going to be adding it in the form of a dictionary. So the first thing that we're going to be adding in this dictionary is the ID, and we're relating it to row array 0. And the second thing we're going to be adding is the message, and that relates to row 2. And what this row here is this, this is an array, and it relates to the column number, the column in your table. This links back to that previous video where we created that table. So let me show you what I mean. If you head to our table here, you can see here we've got a column name of ID, user, and message. So for our first one we had was ID, so it was row square brackets 0, and that related to our ID because that was the first column in our table. Then our second one was row square brackets 2, and that related to our message. So you can see here each column relates to a number, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on for however many columns you have. So that's what that row represents. So the first column in the table, the third column in the table, and so on and so forth. Hopefully that makes sense. So we've now stored all of that data from the table in an array called received data. What we want to do now is literally just print out this data to the user in Discord. So to do this, all we can do is just a basic print statement, which is await interaction dot response dot send underscore message open and close brackets. And we want to say we can just write some. I'm just going to write this. I'm going to say all stored data colon. And let's do a new line. Let's just do 2 new lines actually. And then we want to write. We're going to do a bit of some fancy Python with JSON. So we're going to do JSON.dumps. I'll explain this in a second. Received underscore data indent equals 1. So let me explain this. Well, first you need to have JSON, the JSON package imported at the top of your file. So come up here and make sure you have import JSON selected, or sorry, written down, so it's importing it. Then what we're doing is we're saying here, we want to basically just paste down, we want to print every single thing that is inside of this received data array. That's basically all this JSON dumps is doing. It's just literally just printing that data down so the user can see it. Great, so we've now just written the code that will display all of that data to the user. But all we need to do now really is just close off the request and finalize any errors that we could potentially get. So to do this, we're first going to look at the errors. So we're just going to write our except mysql.connector.error as error, and then we're just going to print a message to the console saying failed to get record from MySQL table. So we're just basically writing this error just in case we get any errors that might appear when we when a user tries to receive any of their data from the table, just as some sort of like safety precaution. And now we just need to close off the request to the database. As you might remember from that previous video, I explained about how it's so important at the end of any connection to a database to always close off your request once you have retrieved or executed the command you want to do. So we just do that by just doing cursor.close and then connection.close, and then we can just write a print statement to the terminal just to tell us that the connection has indeed been closed. And that's it. That's all we need to do to get some data from a table that corresponds to the user. So let's run it and let's see it in action, and hopefully there are no errors. And we've already got an error, and that's from a very basic typo mistake that I did here, which I wrote a comma instead of a colon. So if you also made that mistake when you're copying me, well, go back and correct that. So hopefully now, fingers crossed, it will work. So inside of Discord, if we come down and we type retrieve info, which was the name of our command, hopefully when we click enter, it will display all of the data that we have stored in the database. And look at that, it has returned all of the data that we've stored. And these are the two things that we have stored in the database, which you can see here by looking at what we've stored in this specific table. Stored and hello, relating to ID 3 and 4, which has indeed been printed out here. We've successfully retrieved some data from a database that corresponds to a specific user and printed it in Discord. One thing that you might be thinking is, this is pretty ugly, don't you think? And yes, I could not agree more with you. However, in this episode, I'm not going to be, stylizing with you, because that's not the main point of it. I'll leave that up to you and your creative imagination to decide how you wanted to stylize it. You might want to display it in an embed message, or you might want to just do it as plain, simple text. The world is your oyster. Totally up to you what you want to do. But we've successfully done it. We have successfully got the data from the database that corresponds to a specific user who stored that data in the first place, and we've displayed it to them in Discord. How cool is that? And that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it and hopefully you've learned something. If you have, please do consider giving this video a thumbs up, as it helps it out so much in the YouTube algorithm. And while you're down there, if you're not already subscribed, please do. It would help me out so much. But anyway, I'll catch you all in the next video. See ya!